want to start with the disagreement that we see among administration officials here in the U.S. No clear, unified rationale for this war. And I'm curious what history tells us about the potential problems or perils of going to war without a clearly identified goal or mission.
Well, it tells us it's a bad idea. I think the problem is that there are things that the administration identified that it could do, and to some extent these are its war aims and can be achieved. They can do things to the nuclear program that they thought they'd done last June, but maybe need doing again. They can degrade the missile capabilities, production of Iran. They've taken out an awful lot of its navy. All of those things can be done, and if you wanted to say they were a success, you could do. But they said they were going to do more. They said they were going to achieve regime change, but they've got no obvious means of doing so. So that's getting a bit played down. But what they didn't do is prepare their allies or the US people for the things that Iran might be able to do, which is basically make it very difficult to move shipping in and around the Gulf and to threaten installations within the main Gulf states, Emiratis, the Saudis, Qatar, and so on. And that's where their problems really lie, is they don't quite know how to bring this to a conclusion at the moment.
And on that note, when you talk about how to bring this to a conclusion, you talk a little bit about the pros and cons of achieving those objectives with or without boots on the ground. You know, the problem that you write is that not having boots on the ground is a good way to avoid getting caught up in a long and frustrating conflict, but it also makes it harder to guide the final outcome or achieve your goals and could last longer, I guess, right?
I think, the difficulty you've got is that if you put boots on the ground, as it's normally put land forces in, first, it doesn't necessarily itself guarantee success, as the Russians have found in Ukraine. And remember, Iran is a country of 90 million people. But then you've got the country. Then you're responsible for its occupation and administration. And Iran is in a mess. I mean, economically, never mind what's the battering it's recently taken. So understandably, the administration doesn't want to have any part of that. But that means that it's got no means of dealing with the regime. And the consequences of the regime falling on its own accord, which is possible, though I think less likely now immediately, but it's possible, is that you have chaos. You have chaos in this very large and important country. And you're not necessarily able to do very much about that either. So the problem is in doing things solely from the air is that you set things in motion, but you can't control how they end up. And we get to the stage in practice where the main priority of the administration at the moment is really how to stop the Iranians doing harm to America's allies and friends in the region, rather than making sure that the regime itself falls.
When one looks for parallels to past conflicts, so I think chiefly about the second war with Iraq, there was a robust public debate in the run-up to it. We saw the administration go to Congress and to the UN Security Council. That, of course, didn't happen this time around. And I'm curious what that says to you about the likely trajectory, not trying to amass a coalition of allies internationally or indeed domestically.
Well, I think first, when things go wrong, you own it. I mean, this is President Trump's war, to some extent Bibi Netanyahu's war. They own it. If things go wrong, they get the blame. Secondly, allies have got reason to be quite cross that their economies have been put in jeopardy. People are getting killed. It's all very stressful, and they weren't really warned in advance. They weren't consulted on the wisdom of all of this. They may have put in their views, but as we know with this administration, the way that decisions get made can be quite abrupt, and depending on the mood of the president. And so I think you've created a situation where allies are scrambling around themselves to deal with a problem not of their making, and without confidence that the administration can sort it out. A good example of this is the promise to provide naval escorts to get ships through the Strait of Hormuz, which the president made, but which can't be fulfilled because the ships aren't there or it's too dangerous for them to travel themselves. So I think there's going to the aftermath of this is going to be a lot of rethinking about how, from the Allies' perspective, they deal with the US, and hopefully a certain amount of rethinking in the US about the advisability of consulting allies and taking their interest into account when you launch something like this.
Quickly before we let you go, you talked about the things that can go wrong. One of the things that seems to have gone wrong is that in these strikes, the U.S. seems to have knocked out a lot of the potentially more moderate leaders who could take over. Is there a possibility that the Trump administration ends up with a regime that doesn't fall and is more extreme than the one it replaced?
Yes, I mean, to be honest, I think the likelihood that they would find some pragmatic guy who would do the same job that was done by the number two in Venezuela was always a bit fanciful. Mm-hmm. But certainly the Israeli strikes went further than the Trump administration seems to have expected. We're now in a position essentially where the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, is running the country. The hardliners are in charge at the moment. That's why they took risks with Hezbollah for hitting Israel from Lebanon, and are now seem pretty determined to push this as hard as they can. You know, from their perspective, they've got quite a coalition ranged against them, so they've got to take advantage of their main leverage at the moment was the damage to the international economy while they can, and see if they can get some guarantees from everybody else out of that. So, you know, this is a regime fighting for its survival, and will fight hard.